Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of ReFrame, where we reframe how we're looking at the underrepresentation of women to find better solutions to the problem. I'm your host, Ana Trujillo Limon, and today I'm super excited. I've been looking forward to this all year long to chat with my friend Lindsey Lewis of the American College. Lindsey, welcome to the show, and thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, and Happy New Year. And I'm so glad you've waited the 15 days so that we could do this.
Well, I've been reaching out and stalking you for many months before that. So, I've been looking forward to it a lot longer than that. So let's talk a little bit about your career path into the industry. And I always like to know what everybody wanted to be when they were little growing up and how you came to be in the financial services industry.
Yeah, so I actually grew up doing a lot of sports. And so I did gymnastics and cheer through when I was little, ended up doing track in college. I definitely thought I was going to go like doctor or athletic trainer or agent type of route, like sports agent. And I just saw like the trajectory and the time that it took to become a doctor. And I was like, oh man, that's going to take me all these years, all this money. And I had like made my first business plan through that process of like the ROI on that just didn't make sense to me. And so I ended up going to school for accounting was what my original major was. And I took my first classes, and one of the professors was like, you have way too much of a personality to be an accountant. But shout out to all the accountants out there because we need you. And one of my brothers is an accountant. So like we love accountants. But anyway, I took a class on personal financial planning, and the undergrad program was launched of personal financial planning. So I ended up doing that for my undergrad. And so I just like started out in this career very early and young. And so, with that program, you can sit for your CFP your senior year of college. And so I, was a CFP MBA before age 25. And so
Awesome.
just like full send into adulthood and into the industry.
No, I love that. And I have a lot of questions, as you saw on the list, about like designations and all of that stuff. We're going to dive deep into that a little bit later. So tell me about your journey into your current role. And for those people who don't know what you do at the American College, can give us a little bit of background and context.
Yeah, I like to say I'm a recovering advisor. So I worked at an RIA for a number of years, helping institutional clients with their defined contribution and defined benefit plans. I really love that role because I worked with executives building the plans for their employees and then with the employees themselves through participant education. So I would go on site, I would educate the folks at the companies about their plan, the investment options, eligibility. It was a really great way to learn a lot about financial planning really quick and had to be very rapid with that because in one day I could chat with someone who's part of the defined, defined compensation plan. And then I also could be talking to someone with garnished checks and trying to make solutions for all the different folks in between too. So from there, I ended up working at a broker dealer in their personal advisory services space, helping folks with $1 to $8 million of assets with their retirement goals as individual clients. And it was a great role. I found out I excelled and did really well, like built a book really large very quickly, but it wasn't making my heart sing. And so throughout this process, I actually grew up in a community in Utah where there weren't a ton of income producing women outside of the home. And so I have always been really passionate about women finishing school. So my alma mater for individuals who get married during college, which there are actually a lot where I grew up, the completion rate for those women is actually very, very low. And then I witnessed personally firsthand, friends, colleagues, peers, etc., who one of the D's, death, disability, divorce, across the board, impacting their life because they didn't have a skill set in order to produce income, right? After one of those events happened in their lives. And so I hosted and still host an event for women and girls who are interested in entrepreneurship, leadership, and finance at my alma mater. And I've done that. I'm going into our 7th year. It's called Polished. It's absolutely incredible. And so from that, a woman who I did my undergrad with, she started working at the college and was like, you should get a job at the college because of all the passion you have. Like, you are an advisor by trade, and then you have this passion for women. It would be a really nice pairing. And so the American College of Financial Services is almost 100 years old. Our centennial anniversary is in 2027. And we have these different centers of excellence, and you can kind of think of them as schools within like a traditional college. So the American College is an accredited college. And so we have these different centers of excellence. So I'm over the Center for Women, but we have one for military members, one's for special needs, ethics, retirement income, Center of Economic Empowerment and Equality. And so each of us focus in that specific role for that specific market demographic. And as a woman, I'm obviously deeply passionate about women getting into the industry, but staying in the industry, right? Like looking at those attrition rates and looking what firms and cultures can do in order for their, female financial professionals to thrive.
That's awesome. And y'all do such great work there and have so much amazing research and resources for people. So just shout out to what you guys do there at the American College. Love the work. Have been a fan for many, many years. So I'm curious, you mentioned that, your background in all of these different types of organizations. What are some of the lessons you learned at the different organizations, and how do you bring them into your leadership skills and style today?
Yeah, I think it's like such a wonderful thing to go through that process and to just be like a sponge, right? And so I would say there's obviously like ups and downs that happen within any institution that I have worked at. And so it's really interesting, like the little life lessons that you get across the board. But I would say with the first RIA, that is really when I started to step into my confidence. And we'll talk about designations in a little bit. But I'm such a proponent of, getting certified and designations and specialized knowledge, because it really does help you as an individual, but really also your clients. And I did really well in my undergrad program from a GPA aspect. And so I was awarded a scholarship to take the CFP exam right out of school, right out of my undergrad. And I actually did not pass the first time I took it. And it really was such a challenge for me as an individual, because I had, you know, a 4.0 in high school, almost a 4.0 in college. Like, this is the first time that like Lindsey had really failed academically on a big scale, right? And so I took a step back, and then I was like, you know what? I'll just go take the 65. So I went and took the 65, and then I also didn't pass that exam. And so I was like, oh no, this industry is not the right fit for me. So in that process, I like went back and got my MBA. And then during the MBA, I actually had a really influential leader who was like, you can do this. Making, the decision to take your CFP is $1 million decision. So you have 5 attempts. You better use all 5 of those, because you're going to make $1 million more in your career just by having those credentials. And I was like, okay, Scott, I'll listen to you. So I ended up taking the CFP again, passing, took the 65, passed, like did all the things that I needed to do. So at that first RAA, it really was like learning how to come into my space and really around that like participant education. And I think that there are barriers that are in existence, and there are barriers that we put in our own mind. And so I was like, people aren't going to take me seriously because I'm a young woman. And I used to like dye my hair dark and like wear glasses when I didn't need glasses so that I would look older. And now I'm like, oh, it's fun to see that version of myself and, give her grace. But really that education component was such a big, meaningful impact. And then the great thing about working at the broker dealer was that the first RA, I really wanted to be a senior financial advisor. I'm like, I can do this. I'm servicing it, really large accounts. I can do this by myself, or, as the client facing advisor. And so that was the beauty of working at that broker dealer, is that they took a chance on someone who is a little bit younger, or, different than a lot of the different folks that they had. And I was able to be successful in that. And that is one lesson I learned, is that, if you put your mind to it, you can really do it. And I had a lot of test anxiety through that process. And this is why I love to like teach and train. Because I had to take like the 7, the 63, the SIE, like all in like a 4-week window. And I was like,
Oh my
okay,
gosh.
well, any test anxiety that I had, like we don't even have had time to ruminate on it. So I've learned a lot of lessons. And the most important around the work that I do at the college is really this applied financial knowledge, and that it is such a beauty for individuals as consumers to feel empowered as they're making financial related decisions. But as financial professionals, that acumen and knowing, having the concrete knowledge of what to do best for a client, there's nothing else that's like really better than that. And so the lesson I learned out of college really is around that applied financial knowledge, and then making sure it speaks to the appropriate communities, whether that's women, people of color, the LGBTQ plus community, non-able bodied folks, like just being able to speak their language.
Oh, that's so important to say that. And what I love about the story you just shared is I feel like there's a lot of really positive, successful propaganda that we put out there on social media. Like, oh, we do this, we passed this exam and we did this. But sometimes it doesn't, like just like you said, like it's not always a first time success to pass the CFP exam. It's very difficult. It's very hard to prepare for. It's such an amazing accomplishment. So I love your transparency in sharing that, because you guys did do some research on that, right? At the American College, about how these designations and certifications and all of this knowledge that you get through programs at the American College does lead to higher confidence rates. Is that right? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, not only does it lead to higher confidence rates, it also leads to higher income.
Mhm.
So folks that have, one designation can see a 30% increase within their compensation. And if they add more, they can see continued increases of their compensation, which we found in a study that we did, that the traits of successful advisors, that 60% of successful advisors get into this industry to help and serve folks. And so compensation just happens to be this like lovely like cherry on top that
Mhm.
happens. But as you get more specialized with your knowledge, then you have that increased income, but also different type of clients that you can work with. I think the beauty of it too is, when you think about physicians, right? You have your, general practitioner, and they kind of have to have this like large breadth of knowledge, but they don't go very specific, right? If I have an issue with, a ligament or a sprain, like they're gonna turn me to a specialist. And the thought of that is what we could do as financial professionals is also to be those specialists. And so that's where these different centers of excellence or different designations, where you can get very niche down into a specialized knowledge. And recently the college just launched a new tax program. And so for folks that it's around tax planning, right?
Mhm.
So we're not giving tax advice, but there's so many strategies that have to happen within a great financial plan in order for you to be tax efficient. And so, just honing in on those specific examples or niches is so immensely helpful. So not only are you doing better for your clients, you're also like compensated a lot more, and it's directly correlated to confidence, especially for women.
Yeah, we're in the midst of doing our annual State of Women in Wealth Management research, and this year we did it a little bit different. We did the qualitative research first, so we're doing these in-depth interviews with successful female advisors out there, and the goal is to kind of uncover some of the different common threads that they all have, like kind of similar to what y'all were doing. But that's one thing that keeps coming up is the CFP was really critical for me to be able to be more confident, to serve my clients better. The money aspect hasn't come up, but it's interesting to hear you saying about a lot of things that we're seeing come up in the qualitative interview. So I love to hear that. And another thing was that it helps with that confidence level, the education aspect, not just the designations, but like the continuing education, going to conferences, learning things, getting additional designations helps with the imposter syndrome. So I know this wasn't on the list of questions, but I'm curious about your perspective on imposter syndrome and the role that educational programs play in helping you kind of quash that feeling.
Yeah. So I think I used to have some level of like subscribing to imposter syndrome. And then I watched Rashra Shudami's graduation commencement speech. And like, that's a homework assignment for everyone. But she says imposter syndrome like doesn't exist unless we allow it to exist. And so she recounts a story of when the pedal bike was invented, that it was one of the first times that women had access to leave their communities at a faster rate, maybe safer, etc. And so the doctors coined the term bike face when they would get really flush in the face from riding their bike, which we know is from aerobic exercise nowadays. But at that time, they were saying that that was a medical condition and that they shouldn't ride bikes. And that was like their access to, move geographically. And so her argument is that imposter syndrome is the modern day bike face of us just saying like, I don't know if I can go to this next level because I don't feel confident there. And so I would just say like over the years, I'm like, there's still like a part of me that does subscribe to like, I have felt this way. I have felt uncomfortable in a space where I'm like, do I deserve to be here? But now I'm like, if I'm invited, I'm going to show up, I'm going to sit at my space and I'm going to do the best that I can. And so it's very interesting from like a mindset perspective. And there's this another amazing book that I read is like validation is for parking. Like we're just like confident within that process. But I do think education has played a huge role, especially for me, because then I can have those conversations and I can speak the lingo. And a lot of this industry is like who you know, and also to like be conversant with those folks. I have made some like really silly things that have happened, right? Like one time I was networking with someone and I was like, oh, where do you work? He's like, you mentioned the company. I'm like, oh, bless your heart. I have like I don't hear very great things about it. Like this person was like one of the seniorest leaders at that institution. And I'm like, okay. But like that's how I felt in that moment. And so imposter syndrome, I think, definitely can still like come up. But I think it's like a centering practice of reminding yourself that, if you have the education, you have the skill sets, you have the passion, you have the drive, like you deserve to be there. And that hopefully we can take steps and strides towards like removing imposter syndrome from our minds.
For sure. No, I love that. I feel like sometimes I'll start to feel that way. And it's like my mom always said, and I think it was maybe a Joan Baez quote or some lyric in one of her songs that action is the antidote to despair so I always use that like when
Yes.
I'm feeling any type of imposter syndrome, like why don't I just go do a master class or find a LinkedIn course to help me with this thing I might be struggling with in the moment. And I find that helps me, I don't know, at least feel better. But then at the end of it, I come out with a few extra skills. So I love that.
100%.
But let's shift a little bit because I know you're a big advocate and champion for diverse women in financial services, and you do a lot of really great work in that area. Let's talk about why that's so important to you.
Yeah, when we look at the like gender demographics within the United States, like still to this day, like women are paid 84 cents to a man's dollar. And that typically is like looking at white women. And then you look at different subpopulations, women of color, Latino women, Black women, Asian women are all getting paid even lower percentages, 52 cents, 54 cents, 70 cents to the dollar. And then how does that impact retirement? So women on average have 40% less in their retirement accounts as they retire versus their male counterparts. But they are likely going to live, 20 to 30% longer. So they have less money, they earn less money, they're going to live longer. And it's just this equilibrium. We keep hearing about this like great transference of wealth, right? So these baby boomers and the silent generation are going to pass away and women are going to inherit wealth at larger levels, also like build their own wealth, right? Like I don't want to miss out on that. Women are earning more in some capacities than they have been in the past. And so you see this like big pendulum swing of income, right? And there's many comments around like money is power, and the fact that there are still so few financial professionals who are women in this industry just like blows my mind. It's very interesting to see like the percentage of CFP professionals that are women really has not changed in 2 decades. What makes that really difficult, and like to the CFP board's credit, is that there's such a large denominator of folks, right? There are more CFP professionals over the age of 70 than under the age of 30, right? So like we have this big denominator. So as perhaps they let their credentials expire or something like that, like we'll see a little bit more gender equality, but still of the newly minted classes, right? We're still not at gender equity there. And if you want to like push the demographics, right? Theoretically, you would have to have like 100% women for like so many years in order to like hit to gender parity. And so part of the passion and the work for this is that you see this huge generational wealth change. You see the country at large moving to a minority majority by the year like 2050. You see the transference of wealth, people earning more, and people wanting financial professionals that have similar lived experiences to them. Not saying like a male advisor could work with a female client and they could work very well together, but there might be a female advisor that resonates more with male client. Like there's different demographics, but until we have the exposure of more female financial professionals within the industry, it's hard to like navigate that. And so part of that passion is really around making a more equitable workforce across the board. And it's interesting to see kind of the pendulum of this like diversity, equity, and inclusion, like keep swinging different directions, right? Post the murder of George Floyd, we saw like a ton of initiatives going that way. Now we kind of see kind of a drawback with, the rollback of affirmative action, Roe v. Wade, other different initiatives where you're like, oh, can we have this as part of like our company policy? And there's like, not to be political, but like there's some of those like geopolitical things that are impacting kind of corporate culture. And so the work that I do is just to like, hey, like we're still here. We still want more seats at the table. We still want to, show that this is a great place to work. And, for women who are looking for time autonomy and independence and great compensation and who are service oriented, I think it's so interesting about the qualitative metrics you have with your study thus far that they didn't bring up compensation, but all of those women, I guarantee you, make a lot of money. So it's just like a byproduct by doing the right thing for their clients. And so to bring this full circle, that's why I'm so passionate. It's just like this huge opportunity that we have. And we have, 100,000 financial professionals who plan to retire in the next 10 years, which is like 30 to 40% of the entire financial advice workforce. It's like, how are we going to replenish this in order to, one, meet demand, but two, also have a more diverse workforce?
Absolutely. And I'm curious about your perspective on, like you brought up the statistic from CFP board. It's remained largely unchanged for many years. What do you think are some of the primary barriers that prevent more women from coming into the profession and the industry, but also that prevent them from staying longer term?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I've heard the term of like, you got to just stick 3 years and you'll survive the industry, which there's no like actual research-based evidence of that. I think it's just like a wives' tale. So like, I don't know. But you have to go even further back, right? So girls' confidence in math, from research from Rock the Street, Wall Street, peaks at age 9. So that is when they feel the most confident about math. Age 9. I have a daughter who's almost 4. So I'm like 5 years from now, that's like her confidence in math. Mind blowing. Girls start self-selecting or stop raising their hand in classes starting around age 14 or 15. So they stop asking questions. They start self-selecting out of STEM related fields around that age. And they don't have really great pop culture references when we're thinking about it, right? So if you think of the movies or the things that you've seen when it relates to financial services, like we have Wolf of Wall Street, we have Billions, we have, The Big Short, which is very like masculine, very cutthroat, which like there are aspects that can be that, but for the most part from like the lifestyle of a financial advisor, it's like, I'm going to my seat today to help my clients better understand their life goals and how their finances align there, right? So it really is this like paradigm shift of how they think about financial services. As for women who are coming into the industry, right, there's a lot of cultural things that happen. There's conscious and unconscious bias that folks have at any type of culture, right? And so some of these firms will position these individuals in like an operations or a client servicing role early on, right? And it's usually because they're really great with people and they're really great at executing things and getting things done. And so typically what I advocate for younger folks that are going into positions is to, even if they're a client relationship manager, is to ask for a paraplanner title. Because with a paraplanner title, I have way more branches of different types of roles I could have. But if I go like CRM or operations based, that might put me on one trajectory that's a little bit harder to hop back over to this other trajectory. So that's what I recommend for young folks, and to show an eagerness, right? Like take the SIE exam, start, like you can take this SIE and the Series 65 without being sponsored, right? So you could do all of those things, and then you could also see if you like it or you don't like it. And then what I find for kind of those newer experienced or like newly experienced advisors is that they don't have like a great mentor or contact within their own firm. And there are some institutions that don't want to do mentorship outside of their own firm. And it's just like a time capacity, right? Like I'm a mom of 2 kids. If you did like an early morning breakfast, like my son's school starts at 7:20. I got to drop him off, got to drop my daughter off. Like there's no possibility of like meeting that. Or we got like dance or daycare after school. And so it's like creating these more integrated time schedules or ways for people to create mentorship and connection. And then I think it's also aligning compensation differently, right? So a lot of firms in the past have had like very much so an eat what you kill mentality, which if I'm going in this industry to help and serve folks, eventually like my sales cycle probably will lead to that dividend, but maybe there's like a compensation model that's somewhere in between where it's like you have a base salary plus a bonus and then you ramp down and this ramps up, or have those regular conversations with your employees and fostering cultures of inclusivity, which is allowing people to provide feedback up and down. So those are a couple of things that are barriers or limitations that we've seen. And then there's a confidence level that comes with education. So
For sure. Linz, I really love how you frame up, okay, this is a barrier, but here's a solution. Like that's really critical. I love having when guests give us really key takeaways. So, speaking of key takeaways, you brought up your recommendations to younger professionals. And I know y'all have done some research on the perceptions of the industry in the different generations. What are some key takeaways from that research, specifically when it comes to the perceptions of young women have of the industry that you would like to share?
Yeah, so we did our pilot version of Gen Z's perception of financial services. And I am a younger millennial, like on the cusp of being Gen Z. So I'm like, oh, this is what it's going to be. And then it was like different information. But my first thought was like, they want to work in a virtual environment. No, actually, they want to work hybrid. I was like, oh, news to me. And they still find the industry at large like stuffy, outdated, kind of like old mahogany. Like some people really like it. It's just like a flavor. So we actually will be releasing the comprehensive findings later this year so that we can help firms have a better like lens on how they can especially hire like Gen Z folks. It's interesting because I've been to a lot of conferences and there's always a session of like, how do we deal with this generation? So like when I was coming up, like what are we going to do with these millennials, right? They're entitled. They don't want to work. They da, da, da. And then it's like the Gen Z, like, what are we going to do with these individuals? They're entitled. They don't want to work. Da, 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 da. So it's like, how can we create roles or narratives that are slightly different? And when we think of prospecting back in the day, like a lot of folks would like cold call, right? But there's different and more innovative ways to prospect for younger folks where it might be like DMing in like a social media app, but then like FINRA or something, or your compliance department hasn't updated the policies or procedures in place. So it makes it a little bit tricky. But the cool thing about the industry is that it is really innovative, right? From a technology aspect, it's interesting. I gave a presentation around AI and financial services is actually one of the sectors that adopted AI one of the earliest, right? With banking metrics and underwriting metrics, not saying all was accurate or good, but it's like preventing fraud and like other aspects. So it's like there are a lot of things that are really positive about financial services. It's just like painting that picture, especially for Gen Z. But we have like a digital communication barrier with that audience. And so it's like,
Mhm.
how do we bridge the gap there? And so, yeah, definitely take a look at the college. We will be releasing that research later this year where we look at different subpopulations based on gender, age, race, veteran status, really around like what they're looking for within financial services.
That's gonna be so helpful because I feel like there's a lot of, like, just people, anecdotal evidence out there from folks to have some really good concrete research. I'm so excited for that to come out. So,
Yes.
Linz, as we start to wind down, you're involved in building community for women across the industry. You've done a really great job with that. What do you think the role of having a strong sense of community plays in, attracting women and retaining them in the industry?
Yeah, I think that women don't want to be the only in
Mhm.
the room. And there are some women that thrive in that environment. I grew up with six brothers, no sisters. I'm like, I can handle a lot of masculine energy. But there's something so beautiful about being together. And I recently started a yoga teacher training, and we were talking about communal effervescence, right? And that like emotion you feel when you're all together, like
Yeah.
if you were at a Taylor Swift concert, right? Like the energy in the room, right? That's also what we have when women get together within financial services. And it's been really beautiful to go into a variety of different types of firms, right? RIAs, broker dealers, insurance backed institutions, and watch these women light up and thrive when they have those communities and those an ability to communicate with someone who has similar lived experience to them.
Mhm.
I think it's important, especially with the pendulum of the DE&I, that companies consider making this still a priority or finding a way to weave it in their culture aspects. Because I have chatted with a lot of very successful financial professionals who are women, and a lot of them have thought about leaving the industry at some point, right? And I know for me, from my personal example, it's because I had strong, confident women that I could turn to and have that conversation. That I was like, you know what, I can do this, right? And so when we think about that lived experience, that ability to relate, and that ability to thrive, like I don't want women to just survive in financial
Yeah.
services. I want them to thrive and flourish and excel exceptionally. And that community is so important. And my one tidbit and takeaway for folks in there is that, like, let's all just be women's women, and like
Mhm.
we're not pulling up ladders. We're not, we're letting like, because I hear like, well, back in my day, it was really. I'm like, okay, you had to live through that. Like, let's make it better. So I mentioned this at one point. Like, I have a daughter who's younger. Like, if she wants a career in financial services, like, bet your bottom dollar, I'm going to do my very best so that she has a better and easier experience than I did getting into this industry, and then her daughter can. So I think that's the beauty of community, is really uplifting each other and finding that connection.
For sure. And you said something really critical there, right? Having that abundance mindset and not the queen bee mentality, right? I just detest that hazing mentality. Like, oh, I went through it, so you should have to go through it. It's like, why? Why do you want to spread that negativity? But I've been blessed not to come across a lot of women like that in the industry. So I'm really grateful to know a lot of really incredible women who have an abundance mindset. So, Linz, my last question is, what's your vision for the future of women in our industry, and how do you hope your work will contribute to shaping that future?
Yeah, I think the vision that we have, especially within the college, is just creating that women's leadership mentality. So frequently I'll see women in institutions that don't want to ascend to leadership levels because they see the model of what work life integration or work life harmony looks like. And they're like, I'm opting out of that
Mhm.
because I want to look at this. When we look at how schedules and work weeks were created, like they weren't built for a woman's life, right? So, or a person's life that is integrating a lot of different activity, right? And so I'm really hopeful that women, through the work that we do at the college, is that women feel confident in their ability to ascend to leadership positions. Because if our voice is not at the table or advocating for us, or if we don't have a male ally or non-binary ally that's there, like they don't know, right? So one thing, leadership positions. Two is just being really educated and being really good as a financial professional, right? As you help your clients, they get more educated, they get more confident. You get more educated, you get more confident. It has this like beautiful ripple effect. And then lastly is just really around maintaining that connection and that abundance mindset, like you mentioned, and really around some of the work that I do with a partner firm called Catalyst, where it's like making sure that folks arrive at the location where they can thrive, because you could be like a lackluster financial advisor in one culture environment and you could do really well at a different institution. And so it's, especially for women, really important because they stay loyal to a firm to a fault, right? So they're like, well, they took care of me in that process. I'm like, you don't even own your book of business and you can't sell that later. If you would have like pivoted at that moment, but they're like, I don't know if my clients are going to follow me. And it's like, your clients absolutely love you. Like they're going to follow you. And so it's like making sure that they are in the right place in order to thrive. And so that is what I'm excited that's on the roadmap for this year and hopefully for years to come. And so that percentage of women who are CFPs and across any designation, except for the AFC and the CDFA, those ones, they're flip-flopped of like women to men percentage. Any designation, right, is just helping more women get into it, stay into it. And so if you have any capacity to sponsor women through an educational program, that's my call out to you. Sponsor her.
Love it. Well, you heard it here. Please sponsor women who are coming up wanting to get new designations. You provided a lot of really amazing takeaways this episode, Linz. I really appreciate you taking some time to join me today.
Absolutely. Thank you and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year. And everybody else, thank you for tuning in to this episode of ReFrame. Next month, we're going to be chatting with Denise Sprung about some really cool marketing strategies that she employs and some really cool stuff you could learn from her. And our State of Women in Wealth Management survey will be ready hopefully by next week. So I'll be posting that link. And I hope everybody who's listening shares it and takes it and all of the good things so we could get some really great insights this year. Thank you again, Linz. Thank you again, everybody else. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.